The armed forces of Ukraine flee from Bolshaya Novoselka. The Russian army storms the settlement from all sides and encircles the town. Good day, dear friends. As always, we continue in our daily format, analyzing the situation on the front lines. Today, we'll discuss in detail what is happening around the area of Bolshaya Novoselka. The Russian army has launched an assault on this urban-type settlement, attacking from multiple directions in an attempt to split the garrison of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, AFU, disorganize them, and to some extent this strategy is working. Already last night, part of the garrison tried to break through and flee from Bolshaya Novoselka. However, we'll discuss everything in great detail today. Before we begin, I sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you help the channel grow. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. Now, the situation around Bolshaya Novoselka is approaching its climax. The AFU is essentially trapped, with no good options to escape the situation. I said this a week ago when fighting was taking place for the village of Neskuchnoye. If the AFU intended to retreat, it had to be done immediately. Otherwise, units of the 110th Brigade, currently stationed in Bolshaya Novoselka, wouldn't be able to withdraw without significant losses. For context, the garrison of the AFU here, based on the latest information I've seen, numbers about 700 personnel. This is as of early January. Some forces may have been redeployed elsewhere, but part of the 110th Brigade remains trapped. They have a narrow corridor about 1.5 kilometers wide for retreat, but any attempt to use it results in massive losses. It already has. The actions of the AFU in this area are now disorganized. There is visible panic and a lack of unified command. Some parts of the garrison are fiercely resisting, particularly on the eastern and southern fronts, while others attempt to flee. For example, last night part of the garrison tried to leave the settlement through one specific sector but failed. The entire area is under fire, even from small arms. Let me show you. The terrain is completely exposed, leading to a river. There are rivers on both sides, and beyond them there are elevated positions. Retreat here is not even a lottery. It was a lottery a week ago. Now it's outright suicide. As a result, the AFU units that attempted to leave Bolshaya Novoselka last night were pinned against the river and failed to organize a crossing. They suffered significant casualties, both killed and wounded. Meanwhile, the situation within the settlement itself is no better for the Ukrainian forces. Just 2 days ago, Russian troops took control of Vremivka without a fight. This is significant. Over 600 buildings fell under control without major efforts. Imagine how much harder it would have been if AFU soldiers had tried to hold every building and meter of the village as they do in other areas. It would have required considerable effort from Russian forces to capture a settlement of that size. But Vremivka, with its 600 buildings, was taken, and the Russian flag was raised there. Yesterday morning, without even pausing for a break, Russian troops began their assault on Bolshaya Novoselka. Let's examine the details of this offensive. The assault on the settlement began in the morning from multiple directions, 4 to be precise. Airstrikes preceded the attack, targeting AFU positions, ammunition storage sites, and key locations. The assault itself was swift, with Russian forces advancing from several sides simultaneously. The offensive began from Vremivka, where Russian forces crossed the Kashligach River, a tributary of the Mokriye Yali River. There is a partially damaged but still functioning bridge in this area, which the AFU had been using to supply their grouping. Interestingly, they not only abandoned their positions in Vremivka, but also left the bridge partially intact. Usually, they destroy such infrastructure during retreats. This indicates the level of panic and disorganization. Crossing the river, Russian forces managed to secure a position on Andrei Sheptitsky Street despite fierce resistance. It's important to note that while part of the AFU garrison tried to flee last night, another part continues to fight desperately. The fiercest resistance is occurring in this area. The situation remains dynamic, but the strategic position of the AFU in Bolshaya Novoselka grows increasingly dire. Russian assault groups advance in Bolshaya Novoselka, key areas under control. From Vremivka, Russian assault groups secured positions on the southern outskirts of Bolshaya Novoselka, but the main offensive came from the east, originating in the village of Shakhtarskoye, located about 10 kilometers from the settlement. A large convoy consisting of 13 armored infantry vehicles, BMPs, and a tank moved out with the goal of entering the town and seizing control of a key area. To understand its importance, this sector includes an airfield, visible with its runways, and a dairy plant, making it a critical strategic point. According to Ukrainian sources, only 6 of the 13 BMPs reached their destination, but this information remains unverified. Even if accurate, the 6 vehicles successfully entered the settlement and deployed infantry. Intense overnight fighting occurred around the gas station, the airfield, and the surrounding area. As of this report, the airfield is reportedly under Russian control, though the situation is highly dynamic and could shift rapidly. In addition to assaults from the south and east, Russian forces also launched attacks from the north, advancing from Novosilka. Looking at the larger picture, the offensive is coming from 3 directions: north, east, and south, all under Russian control. This coordinated assault is a new tactical approach aimed at splitting and disorganizing the AFU garrison's defenses. From the north, no major armored columns were used. Instead, Russian forces employed a different tactic. Small groups of infantry, 2 to 4 soldiers each, infiltrated positions near the vocational school dormitory area. These groups established footholds and gradually launched attacks to expand their control. This approach makes it difficult for Ukrainian forces to detect and repel these infiltrations, unlike a more conspicuous armored convoy. Preliminary reports indicate that Russian forces now fully control several farms and 3 houses in this area. The offensive continues to expand its zone of control. Today's developments will likely show how dynamic the battle inside Bolshaya Novoselka becomes and how resilient the AFU garrison remains. Another flank saw an auxiliary maneuver by Russian forces as a diversion. 2 BMPs entered the area and deployed infantry, creating a grey zone where the AFU failed to prevent the landing or dislodge the troops. As a result, Russian forces now control the northern outskirts of Bolshaya Novoselka, the airfield and adjacent buildings on the eastern side, parts of the southeastern area, and the section of Andrei Sheptitsky Street on the southern side. While the situation is fluid, these are the current positions as of now. Pokrovskaya direction. January 19th. Advances near Udachne, Kotlino, Zverevo, and Chunishino. Despite deploying significant reserves, the AFU has failed to stabilize the front line in this critical sector. Russian forces are systematically advancing step by step, wearing down Ukrainian brigades and preventing them from fortifying their defensive positions, forcing them into bloody counterattacks. Russian units have already penetrated deeply into the village of Udachne and approached its railway station from the east. This station is a significant logistical hub, responsible for transporting coal from Ukraine's largest mine, located slightly to the north. The AFU has turned this mine into a heavily fortified stronghold. Returning to Udachne, Russian forces now control roughly a quarter of the village and continue to advance steadily. Progress has also been reported in Kotlino and the areas between it and Udachne, as well as in Zverevo and south of the Chunishino station. The offensive continues to gain momentum in these areas. The Ukrainian front line continues to crumble, bringing Russian forces closer to key goals. The AFU's front lines are steadily collapsing, forcing a retreat and bringing Russian forces closer to 2 strategic objectives: a deep encirclement of the Pokrovsk agglomeration from the west and advancing toward Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Currently, Russian forces are just 5 kilometers away from the border of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. From their positions in Udachne, with the western outskirts of Udachne reducing that distance to just over 2 kilometers, the area between the Solyonaya and Volchaya rivers, January 19th. Russian forces have entered Novoandreevka. As you may recall, the day before, Russian units surrounded this settlement from multiple directions, and by yesterday, fighting was already underway within the village. Russian forces are also continuing their advance toward the settlement of Serebryanoye, driving deeper into the wedge that poses a significant threat to Ukrainian units south of the area, along the Volchaya River. In this sector, Russian forces aim to encircle the AFU grouping that has, unfortunately for them, refused to withdraw from the area west of Kurakovo. To ensure future complications for the AFU in this region, Russian forces are pushing forward and fortifying their wedge in the front line. Assault operations are also ongoing in the settlements of Nadeyevka and Uspenovka. These actions are part of the larger Pokrovsk offensive operation. That's all for today's update on the frontline situation. Wishing you a pleasant weekend, take care and see you soon.